Welcome to Santa's MLS Tech Workshops, where we'll be going over ways on how to better your business. In this tutorial, Aaron Dickinson from InfoSparks will be going over how to view market trends using line and bar graphs and what that means when it comes to reading the data.
Let's look here at pending sales, and let's talk here a little bit more about some other things we can do to visualize this data. By default here, we're looking at a 3-year view of the data, and we're looking at it in a monthly format. And so there's some things we can do to visualize this differently. So first thing we can do is we can adjust our time frame. So we can do as little as last year plus the current year, or we can do my favorite, which takes a little bit more patience, but is to choose the max view. And the max view may take a couple of seconds to load, depending on what we're looking at. But in this case, we can go all the way back to 2005 and see sales trends throughout. And so there's quite a bit here that we can see for that trend over time. And so we can also do a 10-year chart as well, which helps a little bit with the zoom. So here on our 10-year chart, we're seeing all of this sales activity monthly. And for sure, this year is different than the others. You know, obviously, there's a lot of seasonality and volatility that comes into sales. Sometimes there's storms that affect activity. But here this year, we had a whole different thing with coronavirus. And so for those of us on the mainland, we saw a similar trend to what you saw in that sales activity, particularly in March, April, were really bad. May was still pretty soft as well. I, and So that changed the entire spring selling season for us. And then as the summer went on, things have loosened up quite a bit. Everyone's been readjusting, and I know you guys have been as well. And so pretty much almost every market I look at and throughout the entire US is up right now year over year on a market-wide basis. The question is just how much are they up? Some markets are up 40, 50, 60% in pendings year over year right now for the October, November period. And then some markets are up just more slightly, which is your area here. You're up about 9.5% in pendings October of this year versus a year ago. So this year has certainly been different. And so with this monthly view, we're seeing all of that volatility, all of that seasonality, and all of those special circumstances that can really have an effect on sales activity. But I also like to look at a rolling period as well to get a sense for the longer term view of the market. And so my favorite to use is the rolling 12. And so I'm typically flipping between that monthly view and that rolling 12-month view. And in this view, we kind of eliminate all of that seasonality in the market, and we see the fundamental long-term trends in the market. And so from here, we can see how your sales activity kind of peaked in the 2017, 2018 range, 10,500, 10,600 type sales, and then has declined a little bit, but has started to turn back up here in response with kind of the post-COVID-19 shutdowns from the spring. So this gives you a sense of more of that long-term trend in sales activity. Still strong, but not as strong as it was a few years ago. So if we look at some of the other stats, same kind of thing, closed sales, your closed sales activity is always a lagging indicator, but it's also, closed sales will be slightly lower than pending sales from the standpoint that some of our sales I know are falling apart between contract and close. But even still, we see your October closed sales are up 4.9% MLS wide. And again, we see that volatility in the monthly view, whereas in the rolling 12, you see that long-term trend. And same thing for something like sales price. Sales price has less of that seasonality, but has more of the monthly oscillation and volatility. And so that rolling 12-month view just really smooths that out and gives you a much clearer kind of long-term view of the trend. And so even though we remember we saw our sales peaking in 2017, 2018, pricing continues to go up, up, up. And a large part of that is because of supply. Supply is down and it's still low, even though, again, those sales aren't quite as strong. Months of supply is still um, in the uh, in the lighter end or the lower end of month supply, especially compared to where it was a decade ago. And so that helps support that pricing. And then new listing activity. And so what we're seeing it in your market, we're seeing it throughout most of the mainland as well, is that buyer activity right now is strong, it's up, but the seller activity is only up slightly or is even down in a lot of markets, including yours. And so we just don't have that new inventory coming on the market to help replenish what's being taken off. And we see that here with homes for sale. Your homes for sale was down 23.3% in October versus a year ago. We did have a question that came in here about uh, have we recently updated it so you can see more time? By default, you're only seeing a 3-year view when you log into InfoSparks. So just if you want to see those longer term views like I'm showing you, you want to just select that longer term drop down there. So here we do have our 10-year view, and in the max, again, we can go back to 2005. So there's one other thing we can do to help visualize this data, and that's switching between a line chart and a bar chart. And so in the bar chart format here, we can see uh, more simplified view of the data we're looking at. And so here we can see the last 3 years for inventory of homes for sale. And we can see how it was 3,029 in October 2018, ticked up a little bit in 2019, and then down pretty strongly here in 2020. And so here we're looking at just 3 snapshots in time. And so that makes it a very simplified trend. In the bar chart format, there's one other thing we can do that I like to do, and that's we can switch from a monthly view into a year-to-date view. And so this can be interesting, for example, for closed sales. Our closed sales in your market are down 9.4% year-to-date. And that will probably tick up here yet before the end of the year because our pending sales are pretty strong here in most recent months. But even those pending sales are lagging a little bit from last year. And so in your market, I would say your market is trending just a little bit behind the typical market average. I think a lot of markets I've seen are up 5 to 10% year to date. And you're trailing a little bit back, but it's still, considering everything that we're dealing with this year, it's still not that that bad of a situation, and particularly with the strength in your pricing is still pretty positive overall. So there was a question here that came in about the color scheme. The color scheme that you see here with the colors of the lines, that's all set at the MLS level, and so there is no way to customize that. However, there are a few customizations, and I'm about to show you that. So we have a chart, and let's do a long-term chart here of pricing. And so these are the kind of charts I love because they're up to the right. So we've got this chart here showing the median sales price over the long term. And we want